Alright guys, so this is going to be our final video for chapter 13. It's going to be our longest video, most likely because we're going to be talking about specific nerves. So far we've mostly focused on the central nervous system, but we are going to talk a little bit about the peripheral nervous system. And so in the peripheral nervous system, we're going to have our nerves and all of those things that extend out beyond the central nervous system. We can actually cover a lot more. We could be covering the structures of nerves specifically and things like that, but we're just going to kind of do an overview of the main nerves that come off of the central nervous system to form the peripheral nervous system. And so this is going to be all of those things beyond the brain and spinal cord. So it's not quite as contained. Okay, so here you can see the brain and the spinal cord for the central nervous system, and as you can see, the peripheral nervous system goes out to the rest of the body. So just kind of a review of some vocabulary. A ganglia is a group of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system, and a bundle of axons forms your nerves that are going to be these structures that you can see in the picture there. And so the nerves are associated with the region where they're connected, and so we have two main groups. We have the cranial nerves, which are going to be connected to the brain, and we're going to have the spinal nerves, which are connected to the spinal cord. And so the rest of the video is going to be us going through these different areas. And so your cranial nerves is actually something that's really important for you to know. If you're moving on to nursing school, they will often refer to the cranial nerves. I've actually heard from nursing students that this is definitely something that you're expected to know and remember. And when it comes to the cranial nerves, they're going to have a number. They're going to be numbered 1 through 12. There's 12 pairs. They're going to have a name, like you see over here. And they're also going to have different functions. And so that function could be sensory only. And there's 3 of your cranial nerves that are only sensory. They could be motor only, and there's 5 of those. Or they could be both sensory and motor. And when it comes to cranial nerves, I've posted lots of videos to hopefully help you because you need to know them by number, you need to know them by name, and you need to know them by function. And so they are going to be identified either with Roman numerals, like you see here. If you aren't familiar with Roman numerals, you may want to get familiar with these, 1 through 12. So you've got your 1s, you've got V for 5, and so like 1V is 1 before 5, which is 4. V1 is 1 after 5, which is 6, and so forth. And so V is an important one to know, and then X is 10. So like 1 before 10 would be 9, 1 after 10 would be 11, and so forth, okay? You can also see them numbered just in your basic modern way, like the numbers we use in our everyday lives, 1 through 12, followed by CN. So once again, you do need to know them by number. Now in your handouts, there is a piece of paper that looks like this. You might want to get it out, and if you haven't already done this, you may want to draw as we go through. We're going to be adding the numbers of the cranial nerves to kind of represent their functions. There's also another handout that I would recommend that you do, and it kind of gives you an overall study page. That way you can look at one piece of paper rather than going through 12 different slides. All right, so we're going to start with number 1, the olfactory. Okay, so that's located here in the brain. If you were present for the brain dissection, this is one of the things that we identified on a sheep brain. And so olfactory equals smell, so this is sensory only. And then when it comes to the damage, pretty much I'm not going to go over those or necessarily read them each time or talk about them each time, because the damage to that particular nerve is going to affect that function. So in this case, if it helps you smell and there's damage, it's going to impair your ability to smell. So here's your number, there's the name, that tells you whether it's sensory, motor, or both, and then it gives you the specific function. Each of your slides is going to be paired that way. And as you can see, a number 1 was drawn here to represent the nose for the sense of smell. All right, number 2 is the optic nerve. And once again, optic, okay, that word should be kind of helpful. It's going to be sensory only. And because optic refers to our eyes, that is going to help us with our vision. And so you can see that the 2s were drawn in the eyes here. All right, number 3 is oculomotor. Now this one kind of gives it away. Okay, oculomotor, this is going to be a motor nerve. So number 3, there's our number, there's our name, and it tells us that it is going to be motor only. Now, if it's a motor nerve, it's also going to describe whether it's somatic, which is voluntary, or if it's going to be parasympathetic, which is part of your autonomic nervous system. And so it is going to be more specific whether it's voluntary or involuntary. And so in the case of oculomotor, ocu refers to eyes, and so here we have the movement of the eyeball and the eyelid. You have 6 muscles around the eyes. This particular nerve is going to control 4 of them, okay? And so once again, we have the eyes, and so there's your 3s. They represent the movement of the eye. So 2 was vision, 3 is moving the eye. All right, next is 4. We have the trochlear nerve, and so if you learned your eye anatomy in lab, there's a little structure called the trochlea that connects the eye medially, these tendons that come off some of the muscles. And so it's actually in the medial portion of the eye, and so you can see where the 4 is drawn there. And so this is also going to control eye movement. So we have motor, we have voluntary movement, and this allows you to kind of look down and towards your nose. So essentially, if you're crossing your eyes, that is going to be related to the trochlear nerve. And like I mentioned, this is named for the little structure called the trochlea. All right, number 5 is the trigeminal nerve, and this one's going to be your first one that is both sensory and motor. The motor is going to be voluntary. And so this provides sensory from the face, so like touch, pain, temperature. If you have something on your face that hurts or you're touching your face, it's going to help to recognize that. It's also going to control your chewing muscles, okay, that masseter muscle, muscles of mastication. And so you can see the trigeminal, the reason it's named what it is it branches into these 3 big branches. It's kind of all around the face, okay. And so in terms of your drawing, you can see that the number 5 here is all the way around, kind of making the face as a whole. Number 6 is your abducens nerve, okay, and abducens comes from the word abduction, which means to move away from the midline. So this one's going to be a movement. It's going to be a somatic motor type of function, and this is going to help you move your eyes to the side. So the lateral movement of your eyes would be an abduction type of movement, and so hopefully that'll help you there. And for your drawings, you can see that it's on the lateral side of the eyes, and so maybe that will help you there. All right, number 7 is your facial nerve, okay, and this one kind of like number 5, that trigeminal, you can see that it goes all around the face. This one is also going to be sensory and motor, and so this is going to contribute to your taste. The front 2/3 portion of your tongue is going to be regulated by the facial nerve. It also is what's going to give you your facial expression. And then for parasympathetic, which is involuntary, we have saliva production. All right, and so if you did have some damage here, this could cause a condition called Bell's palsy, where the face is kind of saggy. But you can see there's a lot of functions for number 7, and kind of like number 5, it is a very large area that's covered, and so you can see this kind of makes up the outside of the face. All right, up next is going to be cranial nerve number 8, which is vestibulocochlear nerve. Sometimes it's called the auditory nerve. And so the reason for that is because it's sensory and hearing. And so if you've ever learned the parts of the ear, like maybe in lab, you have this region here that is going to help you hear. And you have the vestibule, which is this area here. And then you have the cochlea, which kind of looks like a spiral seashell. But the cochlea is responsible for your hearing, the vestibule is responsible for balance, and so this particular nerve, vestibulocochlear, is going to help with those 2 functions. All right, once again, it's going to be sensory only, and you can see here that you've got your number 8s drawn like little ears on your diagram. All right, number 9, glossopharyngeal or glossopharyngeal, either way. Glosso equals tongue. Okay, so anytime you see glosso, we're going to see it again in these nerves. Glosso refers to the tongue. And so your glossopharyngeal, pharyngeal refers to pharynx, which is kind of your throat area. And so we're going to have both sensory and motor. Okay, for sensory, it's going to be taste, which we know that we taste with our tongue, so that may help you out there. This is going to be the back portion of your tongue. This can also help you sense pain, like when you have an infection in your throat or in your ear, It can be very painful, so that's being sensed by the number 9 cranial nerve. It can also monitor blood pressure. Now in terms of motor, it helps you swallow, which is going to be a voluntary. It could also help produce saliva, which is going to be involuntary. And so here we can see that 9 is related to the mouth. You've got your tongue and your throat area, and that's where you're going to add it to your picture. Number 10 is the vagus nerve. Okay, and the vagus nerve is the main nerve of the parasympathetic division, which is your rest and digest division. You're going to learn about that in chapter 15. And so it's also going to be both sensory and motor. And if you see the picture here, you can see that the vagus nerve, it's going to branch out and extend all the way down into other branches of nerves, pretty much all the way down into your digestive system. So this is why it's going to be the main nerve of your parasympathetic division. So in terms of sensory, it's going to help sense sensation in the throat and digestive tract, also blood pressure. It's going to help you speak and swallow in terms of voluntary movements. It also is going to regulate heart rate and digestion in terms of involuntary control. And so you can see here that it's going all the way down into the rest of the body. And so that's where you're going to see number 10. It's going to go down into the throat and further down. Number 11 is your accessory nerve. And so this is going to be a motor nerve that's going to help move your neck and your shoulders. These two muscles, the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius, are going to be innervated from the accessory nerve, and it's going to help you tilt and rotate your head. It's going to help you shrug your shoulders, and so this is going to be one of your cranial nerves that is purely motor. And then we have our final one, which is 12. That's going to be the hypoglossal. Hypo means low or below, and once again, glosso, or in this case glossal, equals tongue. So this is going to innervate below the tongue, and so we have another motor only. It's going to enable you to move your tongue for functions like speaking, swallowing, and chewing. And so for your picture here, you're going to draw a tongue and add the number 12. I've actually posted several videos about your cranial nerves. It's a lot to take in because once again, you do need to know the number, the name, as well as their function, whether it's just sensory, just motor, or both. So here's kind of a little more advanced representation of what we drew as you went through the notes. I've also posted some mnemonic devices to help you. Now this one is good here except for you need to remove spinal because we just called it the accessory. And so you can say that, oh, once one takes the anatomy final, very good vacations are happening. So maybe change the word start because we took out the word spinal. I know that's kind of hard to see, but just change start to are happening. And so this is going to help you remember the order of the names. Okay, so you've got O, T, T. So your mnemonic devices can be very helpful. Okay, so this is just one that you could possibly use. Now here's another mnemonic device, but this one is about remembering function. So is it sensory, motor, or both? And so these letters represent that. So here we have some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter most. So if you know this mnemonic, you can know whether it's sensory, motor, or both. And then the last one is another mnemonic device, and there's more out there if you do a little research. Some are more appropriate than others. But another one is on old Olympus towering tops, a Finn in German viewed some hops. And so hops has to do with alcoholic beverages. But that's just kind of like that first one, whichever one is easier for you guys. All right, and the last thing we're going to cover for chapter 13 are spinal nerves. So just like the cranial nerves were connected to the brain, the spinal nerves are going to be connected to the spinal cord. Now these are actually mixed, okay? All of your spinal nerves are a combination of both sensory and motor. And the sensory enters through the back of the spinal cord, through the dorsal root, and then the motor neurons leave from the front of the spinal cord through the ventral roots. So there's 31 pairs. Now, unlike the cranial nerves, we're not going to have to know all 31 pairs. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at it in terms of groups, or what we call a plexus. And so there's going to be different areas from which they emerge. We're going to have cervical spinal nerves. Now there's actually 7 vertebrae. So there's one that's just below that 7th cervical vertebra, and so there's one more pair of spinal nerves than there are vertebrae. You can still use the same general idea of eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that may help you remember. Just remember that when it comes to the bones, there's actually 7 here. Your thoracic, there's going to be 12. Lumbar, there's going to be 5. So those are the same as your numbers of vertebra. Your sacral is going to be 5, and your coccygeal is going to be 1 pair. And so these nerves, as they extend outward, they go out to innervate the periphery. They're not necessarily going to go straight to the effectors, but a lot of times they are reorganized into other nerves, and so they kind of branch into other, what we call, your individual nerves. But the collection is often called a systemic nerve or a nerve plexus. So this is going to be where they come together, and we're going to take a look at 4 different nerve plexuses, okay? So one is the cervical plexus, which is C1 through C5. You can see there's a collection up here. We have the brachial plexus, which is C4 through T1. This is going to go to your arm, the lumbar and the lower back, and the sacral down by the sacrum, okay? And so the cervical plexus is going to branch into nerves that go to the neck and the head. One nerve that you might want to know is the phrenic nerve. It goes all the way down to the diaphragm and helps regulate our breathing. The brachial plexus goes to the arms, and so it's going to regulate movement of the arms. You actually have a radial nerve that branches into an axillary nerve, which goes to the armpit, and the deltoid muscle of the shoulder. And then you also have an ulnar nerve that branches into a median nerve that serves the hand. The intercostal nerves, these are actually not a plexus, but they are a group that are going to innervate the muscles, the intercostal muscles, which are between the ribs. And so you can see that they kind of go all the way around in between those rib bones, and they're going to innervate those muscles. Your intercostals help us to breathe. So it's not an actual plexus, and you can see that there's quite a few of them all the way from T2 to T11. Then you have your lumbar plexus, which is in the lumbar region, L1 to L5. They're going to innervate the pelvic region and the front of the leg. There's important ones like the femoral nerve. There's going to be the obturator nerve, which passes through that foramen in the pelvis or in the hip bone, and it's going to go all the way down into the thigh, hip, and knee. And then we have the sacral plexus, which is going to be in L4, L5, and S1 through S4. One nerve that you've probably heard of or may have experienced trouble with is your sciatic nerve, which goes all the way down to the heel, and this is going to be responsible for kind of movement and sensation in your legs. And that's going to take care of Chapter 13. I've posted some videos to maybe help you. These videos are mostly focused on the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, just to help you with those, because there's a lot to remember for that. All right, and that's going to finish up Chapter 13, and all we have left is Chapter 15.